Hey guys, welcome back to another video. Today we're going to be creating some Blade Runner type concept art all inside of Blender. We're going to be going over modeling, texturing, and rendering. But before we jump into it, I want to give a quick thank you to the Patreons. Without the support from the Patreons, we would not be able to bring this type of content to you. So if you're a Patreon, thank you so much. This project file will be available for download in the Patreon below if you're interested in becoming a Patreon and supporting the channel, along with weekly exclusive videos. So all that being said, let's jump into it and create this scene from scratch. Okay guys, we're going to be starting off with a pretty basic scene here. I just have a few things set up like a camera and a track. This is just for me to move the camera around and still have it pointing at the same area right there. So the first thing that I like to do when creating concept art or when referencing concept art is to immediately get a scale. So I'm going to punch Shift A and I'm going to add in the default cube. And then we know that this default cube is 2 meters by 2 meters. So when I bring in my character, I should scale them to fit the height of this cube. Okay, so I have my character imported from a previous project, and I just like to use them for scale. So like I said, the default cube is 2 meters tall, but it's cut in half right now. So if we bring it all the way up, there we go. So 1 meter is roughly 3.2 feet, I believe. So we're going to scale them up to something like that. That's close enough for scale for us. And then what I want to do is I want to start blocking it out. So I'm going to bring the camera back and then bring it up as well. And just trying to find a scale for the scene. And by the way, I have the track 2 constraint right here to my track. So the camera will always be facing that. It's just a great way to quickly move your camera around inside of Blender. Let's see. Something like that looks pretty good. Awesome. I'm going to scale this in the Y direction, and then along with that I'm going to go to our clipping right here. So let's click on our camera, and then visibility, or sorry, not visibility, it should be under one of these. We should have some right there under our camera settings, viewport display right here, clip. So we're going to change the clipping up. Something like 1,000 meters should be fine. And then let's just bring that back some, not too much. And then we're going to scale this in the X direction to fill up the frame as well. So this is going to be our floor. Once we got our floor created, we can go ahead and start blocking in the walls. So I'm going to punch Shift A for another cube. And then I'm just going to bring this cube up and call it walls. This is the great thing about Blender, is it's so easy to model inside of this program. I'm going to scale this in the Y direction and just crank it up a bunch, and then scale it overall. Scale it in the Z direction. There we go. Somewhere right about there feels about right. I'm going to pull this back a bit, just to where it's on our edge right here. It's looking good. And then what I want to do is add a mirror modifier. So I'm going to go to our modifier settings, which is right here. So we're going to select our mirror modifier, and then we're going to mirror it on our mirror object. In this case, I'm going to do our focus object. So right there. And then if I bring this wall back, the other wall will follow along with it, along with editing. So I'm going to tab into edit mode, and then I'm going to select this edge right here by punching 2 to go into edge mode. And then once we tab into edit mode, select the edge. Then I'm going to grab the gizmos and just pull that down a bit and pull it forward some like that. So for those of you that don't know, like I said, we're referencing Blade Runner. We're going to be referencing, trying to recreate this scene right here. It's kind of a modeling, texturing, and lighting case study. And the first thing we're doing is just modeling out this base shape. So we're going to pull this out probably a little bit more, and it kind of curves in like that. And then I want to bring this part up right here. And I really want this to reach high up, because if we look at our reference again, you can see it kind of just disappears into black up there. So we really want to have a very, very high Z depth and Y depth to give this image a lot of depth, and really make it feel like there's a lot of space that you aren't seeing. It's really giving you a very interesting look, and it's also bringing focus to this area right here, because we have all this negative space back there kind of pushing the eyes forward. So what we're going to do is we're going to take this right here and just model out that base shape so far, and it looks like That looks pretty good right there. I'm going to tab out of edit mode and just zoom out, take a look at what we're working with. So that scaled pretty big. Let's go to our view right here because this is also clipping. So view and then end. We want it to clip at 10,000 as well. Yeah, so this looks good. I'm gonna slide this forward a bit like that. So just essentially I just want it to feel like it's going into infinity. And then I'm going to grab this plane, scale that in the y-axis as well to push that floor all the way back. And then also just bring it forward too. And I could probably scale this in the Y even more if I wanted to. So select that plane, scale in the Y. Awesome, that's looking good. And then you can see we have our character right there. I'm going to turn off these gizmos for this plane so we can just see exactly what the camera's seeing, or what our render is going to look like. Then I'm going to pull this camera out a bit and focus on the camera. I want to get a little, maybe a little bit lower. Let's take a look at our reference and how they have it framed up. So this is the DP. This was Roger Deakins. He's an amazing DP. Yeah, so their character is definitely, I would say, in like the bottom third of the frame. So what I want to do is pull up our frames right here. Let's go to viewport display, composition guides, and then let's turn on our thirds. And then what we need to do to see them is enable this. Okay, so I'm going to take my track right here and pull that up. And now you can see just by pulling that track up, because it's linked to the camera, I can kind of position that guy in the bottom third. And along with that, I think I can pull this camera up just a bit more. And that looks pretty good for now. We'll stick with that. Next thing I want to do is I noticed right away that this image uses leading lines. So we not only have these leading lines right here, but we have the leading lines of these like computers or these data archive machines. I'm not exactly sure what their official name is. But it looks like we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9-ish rows all leading that way. And this is creating a very, very dramatic effect, and it's falling off into this darkness. So an essential part of the scene, I would say, is definitely that those cubes. And we're going to do that with an array modifier and a mirror modifier. So I like to work as procedural as possible. So you'll see what I mean by that is we're going to add in this cube right here. And then I'm just, for scale, going to put it up against our guy. It looks like in this frame right here, our characters are definitely shorter. I'm not sure if I'm going to go that small with our characters, but for scale purposes, but I think I might pull that up a little bit. Maybe bring it down a little bit. Okay, that looks good. Now let's go ahead and add those modifiers on. So let's add in the array modifier first. We're going to do a factor of 1.1. I'm going to pull this to the right. And then I'm going to scale this in the x-axis. Something like that maybe will be good to start off with. We'll see. I'm going to scale them down just a bit. Make sure they're intersecting with the floor geometry. And then I'm going to increase the count. And then what I want to do is add in another array modifier. So we'll add that in right there. And then what let's do, instead of the x-axis, we're going to do the y-axis. And then we're going to do maybe like 1.8 looks good. Let's just crank the factor up on that. And now we have those leading lines leading into the distance. That looks pretty good. And then what I want to do is, instead of redoing all of this, I'm just going to add a mirror modifier. So let's go ahead and select. It's going to be under generate mirror. And then now I need to select our mirror object, which is going to be our focus again. So now if I want to change how this looks, I can pull them apart or push them together, and I'm going to get the exact same result with both of them. So I'm going to pull this forward all the way. Yeah, so definitely looks like our scale needs to be worked on a bit. Let me jump out of that rendered mode right there. I'm noticing that these objects need to scale down a bit in ratio to our character. So let's just select them, scale. And that's the great thing about working with these modifiers, is we can easily do something like that. And then along with that, I think I want to widen this building as well. So we're using a mirror modifier on that as well. So we can just pull this back some like that. Awesome. And then I also want to grab this top piece of geometry right here and just pull that ceiling up a bit more. And then maybe pull it back as well to give us more of that angle. Let's also pull this up a bit too, and forward a bit also. And that's starting to look really, really nice. However, we don't really know until we add in the lighting. So I'm going to add in the plane right here. This will serve as our roof. I'll just pull that up right there, and let's scale it. And then I'm going to scale in the the Y direction. Pull that forward as well, and then scale it up just a bit to kind of cover everything. Awesome. So I'm going to call this the roof. We got our roof down. We got our floor, wall, roof, and then this is our array. So I'm going to call this just array. Awesome. Let's go ahead and drop that under the geo as well. So now you can see we have our base scene right here. It looks like we could do more than 9 now if we want to really reach all the way in this room and really make it feel vast. So what I'm going to do is go to that array modifier, and we have 200 and let's just do 350 for the Y direction, and then we'll do something like let's try 17 for the that would be the X direction. Yeah, that's looking great right there. So let's work on lighting. Now, I've debated many different ways on lighting the scene, and let's take a look right now. What makes this scene so beautiful and dramatic is there's a lot of things going on. We have leading lines going on. We have analogous color. We have symmetry. We have this very beautiful soft light right here. And after a bunch of experimenting, I found the best way to light the scene was to just use an area light right here, and then crank up the intensity quite a bit, bounce it off this wall, and it's going to in turn bounce down, scatter across here, and kind of fill all this in. So this is essentially if you've ever done cinematography or anything like that, sometimes they will do this in kind of like on sets where it's hard to actually rig a light. For example, if you're on a smaller set and you're trying to key light your actor from above, you might not be able to hang a light up there. So what you'll do is you'll just get a gobo with a some kind of Fresnel or even some kind of lens mount for your light, and just shoot high intensity light at a surface, and then let that surface kind of bounce the light everywhere in your scene, which is exactly what's happening here. This to me appears to be only one light source with some kind of compositing and vignetting over it. So that's exactly how we're going to approach this. We're going to bring in an area light. So Shift A, light, and then area. Area lights are some of my favorite lights to work with, especially inside of Blender, because you can control the beam size. So let's go ahead and jump into that rendered mode right here. Of course, it's going to be dark, so I'm going to start organizing the scene a little bit more. I'm going to add a new collection. I'm going to call this, let's just call this light. So I'm going to bring in that area light. We're probably only going to have one light. Along with that, I'm going to bring the male walking character in and make sure our camera stays clean. Awesome. So obviously we don't see anything. Let's just start cranking up the wattage of this. There we go. So right now we're at 1,000 watts. Now this is the cool trick that we're about to do, is we're about to go to spread, and we're going to start bringing that down. And you know, a lot of people won't necessarily mess with spread right off the bat, but I definitely encourage you to check it out as a lighting parameter, because it can give you some really interesting looks. Like even that looks really cool. I could see going in a totally different direction just with this. Let's crank up the power some more. And then let's bring the spread down some more as well. So now we have this very concentrated light right here. So something that I want to do is allow a little bit more global illumination in this scene. So I'm going to go to our light paths. I'm going to take our total up to, let's say, 45. And I'm going to take our diffuse up to 12. 12 right there. Our glossy up to 12. And then our volume up to 12 as well. However, I'm not really planning on doing any kind of volume in this scene. So clamping at 45, we could clamp at 40, wherever you're comfortable with. And this should, in theory, allow for a little bit more light to start bouncing around, especially once we angle this light at the proper, in the proper location at the proper angle. So like I said, with our reference right here, we have this symmetry of this light bouncing off at this angle. So what I want to do is I want to take this light, bring it up some, take it to, let's say, the right, and then I just want to start angling it a bit right here to hit this wall. So let's take this and let's just rotate it. There we go. And we can see it's hitting that wall and it's reflecting in our scene. However, it is not far enough behind our camera or our character. So I'm going to just take it back. And there you go. We get that circular shape right there. I'm not too happy with that exact look. So let's go back to our light settings right here. We want to make sure we're in area. Let's take the spread down a little bit more. We can kind of play around with it. And then I want to scale this in the Y direction, or sorry, in the Z direction to kind of stretch it up. And then I'm going to bring it up as well. There we go, that's looking pretty good. And then along with that, I'm going to start playing around with some colors. Already, I really like the look of that. So let's just crank this lighting value up. We're going to come back to this light and revisit it as well as we progress. Let's do 1 megawatt. That's looking really, really nice. Change that spread. There we go. So if we keep our spread relatively low, it keeps that squarish shape, which I really like. So I'm going to scale this light up some. Maybe scale it in the Y value a bit. And then just scale it up in general to where it's filling up our whole scene. And then I'm going to slowly take the spread up. Let's try something like 5 degrees. That's not too bad. I think it needs to get a little bit higher. And then point it down a little bit more. That really just feels like sunlight too coming into the scene. I really like the look of that. So that's pretty nice. Now, I could play with these lights all day, but at the end of the day, it's not going to really matter because we haven't created our material. So this is why I say lighting and material play such a big role together. So watch this. I'm going to click on this material right here. I'm going to create a new material. I'm going to call this the wall material. Watch what happens to our scene when I bring this material down to black. Yeah, it totally changes the scene and how it looks. So this is why it's very important when you're messing with lighting to also consider materials, because the difference between this and this is totally, completely drastic. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to import some concrete textures. So I just imported some concrete textures. If you want the download link to these textures, you can check out the Patreon below. If not, I also recommend using Quixel. Quixel is a great program for this type of stuff, or any other, texturing service. There are also free texturing services available. We're going to make this semi-procedural and be kind of modifying it with some noise. So any concrete texture should work. The ones that I decided to go with kind of match this this square kind of bracketed shape that we have here. I believe this is actually supposed to represent marble in the film, but I'm going to be using concrete. I think it's going to be close enough for what we're doing. So I'm going to quickly switch into all of our ACES modes. I'm going to do output sRGB texture right there, and then just raw data for all of this. You should be able to get this similar result with the default cycles filmic color space. I just personally like working in ACES because I'm used to it. So let's go ahead and let's start outputting this. We're going to output our base color. We're going to output our glossiness. And we're going to output our bump as well. So now that we have all of that connected to the correct locations, we're definitely going to need to do some texture scaling on this. This is not scaling and mapping correctly, which is fine. So I'm just going to pause the renderer right there. And the first thing that I'm going to do is in object mode, I'm going to punch Control A and then apply scale right there. And that's going to prepare us to do some just some quick texture projection. So I'm going to go from our 3D viewport to our UV editor, and then I'm going to tab into edit mode on our object. I'm going to punch A, and then I'm going to left click, or I'm going to punch U and click Q project. Oh, but also make sure everything is selected with A. So Q project right there. Now I am Q projecting everything, and it should be scaling correctly if we check that real quick. There we go. So everything should be scaling correctly inside of our texture. The only thing is the texture is still too big. So you could have scaled it with the UV editor, but I like to scale it using just our regular mapping node right here. So let's do something like 10 to start with. 10 on each side. And this is because I want everything to feel like a high enough resolution towards mapping correctly. So I don't want to like scale an 8K texture and stretch it across the whole scene. Also, I want to kind of match that scale to the movie. So if we were to take a look at that still again, the squares were relatively small, so even 10 might not be enough. Let's try 40. That might be a lot better. Let's go into our just quick shaded mode right here. Okay, we can go up even higher. Let's try 60. I like the look of that right there. And then if we want to match these seams up right here because they're not matching up, let's tab back into edit mode, and then let's just select that object. I'm gonna pull back out that texture UV editor again, and then I'm gonna punch A, and then I'm just going to punch G, and just slowly move that to match it up right there. Zoom in a little bit more. I'm gonna zoom in more. If you zoom in more here, it's gonna give you more resolution to kind of work with. So somewhere right there. That way that seam is just matching up right there. And then along with that, this other side should have matched up too. Awesome, there we go. So then I'm going to select both these edges. I'm gonna punch 2 inside of edit mode, select both these edges. If it'll let me. Let's go ahead, tab. And oh yeah, since we're still mirroring, it's going to apply everything we're about to do. So I'm gonna punch Control B and just bevel this edge a bit. And then just add a few in there. Right there. Yeah, I don't want a completely sharp edge. Let's take a look at the wireframe. That looks pretty good right there. You know, always bevel your edges inside of CG. It's a very, very quick dead giveaway that your scene is not real. So let's go back into that rendered mode and take a look at how everything is. Okay, this is looking pretty good, but one thing I want to do is kind of make this angle a bit more dramatic. So if you go into edit mode, so if you just select these faces right here on this wall and then pull them up a bit, it's going to make this angle appear a bit more dramatic, and which is going to kind of follow our reference a little bit more truer to form. And I really like that too because it really feels like the composition is kind of leaning in and pushing out on itself. So far that's a really nice look. I really like how that light is really falling off now on that. But we're still not finished because we need to also deal with this array modifier right here. So let's go ahead and go to our array real quick. And then I'm just going to zoom in pretty heavily on it. And we're going to create a quick shader and also prepare the geometry a bit as well. So let's zoom in some. And right there. So I'm just going to tab into edit mode and punch Control B. And for this to work correctly, I'm going to slowly scale up. And before I do that, I'm going to pause the render view as well so we get this very smooth view. So there it is, beveled. That looks pretty good. I'm really happy with that. I was just making sure it was applied correctly. If you actually look at the original reference, funny enough, it was you can actually see the kind of bevel they have on their material as well. So we know for sure that they beveled that. Let's tab back out. And then what I want to do is create a new material, and I'm just going to call this the array material. We're not going to be using any kind of special type of texture maps or anything like that. We're just going to be using some noise. And that's really all we need. And I'm going to put home key. That's going to bring in the principal shader right here. Shift A, search. Let's grab in some noise. We're just going to do noise texture. Detail, we'll do something like 50. Scale, well, let's output the factor into the base color, and then that will kind of determine what we want. Alright, that's a pretty good scale for now. Let's tab into edit mode real quick, punch A, and then I also want to do a Q projection on this. So U, Q project, and it's going to refresh. Once it Q projects, it should kind of update that scale right there. And something else that I want to do is I'm going to punch tab again, tab out of that edit mode. And then I want to punch Control T for mapping. That way we can have our mapping node on. And this will only work with the Node Wrangler add-on enabled. And this is going to be a very interesting thing that's unique to Blender, which is what I really like, is we can actually input like random data and math data into our mapping node. So I'll show you what I mean. Let's do a separate XYZ, and then Shift A, combine XYZ. There we go. And then just plug all these together. Then I'm going to punch Shift A for object info. And then what I'm going to do as well is kind of pull that back, pull that forward, and then Shift A for multiply, or just a math node in general. Pull in the math right there, and then change this to, let's do multiply. And then we're going to take our random index and plug that into value 2, and it should give us a random offset of these textures. And there you go. It is completely random and different on each texture. This is just to eliminate the possibility of tiled textures or repeated texture mapping. Let's go ahead and punch Control A again, and let's apply that scale as well. And now if we punch Tab again and then select A for all sides, then punch U, and then do Q projection. There we go. I just want to make sure that we're going to, this is going to scale properly, or map properly. I'm going to pull this value right here. I'll pull our X value up a bit, so that way it's kind of mapping uniformly on all sides. That looks great right there. So now that that's finished, let's go ahead and fire up this render view. And then we did that into our base color, but that's not the only thing we want to do. I'm going to punch Shift A for a gradient ramp, or a color ramp. And then we'll bring that color ramp in. And then plug that into our factor. And then plug our color into roughness right there. So now we are not only going to get variation on the base color, but also the roughness as well. Now let's go ahead and fire off that render and see what we are working with. Now that's looking great. We're getting this breakup right here of these reflections. I'm going to go to the specular and just crank the specular up all the way on this as well, so these become very, very reflective. Something else that I want to do is I want to push our character back a bit. So I'm going to take our character right here and then just pull them kind of back some more. And then looking at our composition now, I really want to make this feel like there's more scale to it. So I'm going to take the camera and just pull it up just a bit. Along with that, I want to take our track under our camera and pull that up as well. So right now we're pretty low with that. Let's pull that track up more, and now that will kind of allow us, because it tilted our camera up, it'll allow us to pull our camera up a bit more as well. And then that's really helping with the scale of the scene. I think that these boxes probably should be scaled a little bit more on the Z axis. So I'm going to punch Tab, Scale, and the Tab, Scale, X axis. Yeah, that looks good right there. Punch Enter, and there we go. And then on top of that, I'm going to go to our mirror modifier real quick. And then we're at 0.01. Let's see. Let's just drag them out manually. And just a little bit. That's all we need. Just kind of opening up that right there. Okay, that's good. I'm going to pause that render real quick and just strictly mess with this geometry. So we have our mirror. That's looking good. I'm going to pull that back together just a little bit more right there. Also, I don't think we need 17 anymore, so let's try 12. Perfect. That's going to help update that. And then I'm going to take this down to 200 just for now, just for geometry sake. And then I want to go right here. We're at 1.1. Let's bring that up to 1.2. That's going to separate these a little bit more, so it could be reasonable that someone could fit through those. That looks pretty good. This is 1.8. I'm going to bring that up a bit more as well. And then now I'm going to take this 200 and turn that back up to, let's say, 300 or 350 was a good number. And that way it just falls straight off into the darkness like that. Okay, this is looking really good. One thing that I do want to do is I don't want tiling. I can see some tiling on this texture right here. So we're going to play around with this texture and make it a little bit more procedural and kind of get rid of that tiling. So let's zoom in some right here. I'm just going to attack it from 2 different angles. Let's select that texture. Let's punch Shift A, search noise. Bring in a noise texture like that. And then I'm going to punch Shift A. And then I'm going to bring in a mix RGB. And this is a great way to kind of mix 2 textures together. Color 2, I'm going to do our original diffuse concrete color. And by the way, you can create a concrete shader completely from scratch using the same method as well. You don't need to have image textures. Make sure you have your factor feeding in right there. Color, you don't need color data, you just need factor data because it's black and white. That's all we're going to be using. Let's go ahead and let's increase the detail to 50. Let's increase the roughness a bit. Control Shift click on factor with the Node Wrangler add-on enabled. Turn up the scale up to 40. That's looking pretty good. Yeah, I think we'll stick with that for now. Let's see what the base color looks like with it mixed in. Yeah, so we just kind of broke that up. Shift A. Actually, we could just play with the mix. We could play around with the different blending modes. So screen would yield that. Maybe divide. No, maybe even a multiply. Let's try multiply. And just kind of try to swinging it either way. So that's making our texture fairly dark. Let's punch Shift A, search color ramp. And then I'm just going to bring some white values in. Right there. Alright, there we go. We kind of broke up that surface fairly well. I think we could scale this up to maybe, let's say, 60. That looks good. And then on top of that, let's jump into our bump map right here. I'm just going to copy exactly what we have up here. Control C, go down, Control V. Actually, you know what we won't? We're not going to plug it into our bump. I don't think our bump needs to be messed with as much, but I'm going to plug it into our roughness. So I'm just going to pull these off right here. And then I'm going to bring this mix down, and I'll just keep it all up there for now. All we need is this mix, really. And then we'll mix that into the bottom one, and then mix that into the roughness. Control Shift click. And then we want to probably change the scale of this some. Just so it doesn't match up, even mess with the detail and the roughness as well. I like that right there. So if you recall from other tutorials I've done, the darker the color, the more reflective it's going to be. So in this case, it's going to be quite reflective, which is good. That's kind of what we're dealing with for a baseline. I don't want it to be too reflective, but I do want it to kind of have a sheen to it. So let's take a look at that right there. And the only true way to really see what your texture is going to look like is just to look under it, look at your texture under the right circumstances. In this case, we're designing this texture just for this scene, so we're just going to want this lighting right here. Let's go ahead and click this, Control Shift click. There we go, and now we can kind of see our texture right there. It looks like it's kind of stretched a bit, so I'm going to make a mapping node for these 2 noise textures, and then I'm going to punch Control T, and then I'm just going to output that vector right there. So they're both going to be scaling on a relatively same axis. So let's output this noise texture, and then let's take a look. It looks like we're going to want to scale this on the Y value, so let's scale that up to, let's try 2 maybe. Okay, 2 looks pretty good. I maybe want to bring it down to have a little bit of a stretch. And then let's go to our camera view right here. See what our camera's going to see. So 1.2. That looks pretty good right there. I think I'm happy with that. Let's output that back again. And then see what we're dealing with. Alright, that looks good. Maybe I'll bring the mix factor down a little bit on this. So I'm going to bring that down right there. And that one down right there as well. And then also, I'll probably mess around with how dark this texture gets. So I'm just going to bring up the lower values. Bring down the saturation. Let's start off with just the base color. Control Shift click, output that. And do 100% right there. But I'm going to go to this color ramp and bring that up. Bring up the value that is. Alright, that looks pretty good. Let's output back that principled material by control shift clicking. Let's output that roughness, and then let's hit render again and see what we have. So after looking at our reference a little bit, I decided to kind of change how this noise texture was mixing. I switched it back to screen with a roughly 0.5 factor, and then I brought the brightness down a bit on the base color of the material with the brightness and contrast node. And then you can see right here, the result we get is much closer to the original reference. I really like what we have going on so far. We're almost finished. Let's go. Let's play a little bit around with this lighting some. We're so close in terms of composition, but not quite there yet. So let's go to this area light. Let's snap out of this right here. So if we look back at our reference, the light reach is a little bit lower. It's not quite as bright as it is in my scene. For some reason, I'm clipping. Now, this could be because of the certain, maybe they were doing a different path tracing technique. Maybe they have a volume scatter in here as well. However, I was not able to get the scene as bright as theirs without cranking that light up quite a bit. And maybe it's because I'm in ASUS and maybe the other color system inside of Blender Filmic would be better off. I don't know. But I'm going to scale this a bit in the Y direction. There we go. And then I'm going to angle it down just a little bit. Actually, I want to pull it up a little bit more. Not too much. Yeah, pull it up a little bit more, and then I'll try angling it down a bit, just ever so slightly. There we go. And that would even be a cool animation. I could easily see cool animation happening like that. Yeah, this is looking really nice. Another thing I want to do is I noticed in the reference there were two characters walking. So there was the main character, and then there was the archivist that was next to the main character, whose name escapes me right now. Joe, I believe that's his name, Joe. Next to our main character. So I'm gonna move this over a bit right there, and I'm pushing Control C, Control V. You can see right here these characters are pretty prominent, and that's because they're wearing darker clothing. In this case, my characters just aren't going to have any clothing because I don't want to go through that process. They're really just here to provide scale. I don't want to make them identical in size, so I'll scale one down just a bit. They're really just supposed to be kind of shapes, giving us context to the scale. And all this is looking fantastic. I'm really happy with it, with how it's turning out. I think one of the final touches we need to do is punch new layer right here. And then I want to kind of mess around with this floor shader. So I'm going to make this a little darker. Not too dark. I usually like making my floors really dark and reflective, but in this case, I want it to kind of bounce some light around. I'm going to search another noise texture, just a regular old noise texture. Control Shift click, Control T, and then what we'll do is let's mess around with the scale. And this is definitely not mapping right, so let's pull that down the Y value. There we go. Maybe I'll stretch it more on the X. Nah, we'll keep it on the X. Maybe on the... No, we'll just keep it how it is, like that. And then what I want to do is add the detail of, let's say, 50 again. And then add some roughness. And then Shift-A, search color ramp. And then I'm just going to plug this into our base color. And the reason I like using color ramps is because I can just quickly modify and control it if I need to. And then I'm going to Control C, Control V that again. Or just punch Shift-A color ramp. And then plug that. Take our factor, plug that into factor. Take our color, plug that into roughness. Take our specular and turn that up almost to 100%. Whatever you're feeling. Control Shift, click the material. That's where everything copied to. I'm just going to name this material floor right there. And now we can kind of see what we have going on here. So as we make this window bigger, kind of see what we have. Yeah, I really like what we have a lot. Let's go back into our camera view real quick. Turn on the gizmos, click the camera. There we go. Yeah, this looks really, really good. I'm really happy with how it turned out. There's a few things in post-processing that I want to do, like add vignette, add bloom. But I just wanted to show y'all very quickly how you could create this scene and how like this Hollywood level shot is, you know, I would say we're like 90% the way there. There's a few things that I would do to kind of change it up a bit. Can just be created in like 30 minutes inside of Blender. So guys, thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed the video, you can subscribe down below. You can also consider supporting us on Patreon, where we have weekly videos and content for you. Not only are we giving away free assets, but we're also doing a weekly video. So I think I might upload recreating a different scene on the Patreon sometimes next week. Also, you can follow me on any social media, keep in touch with me. Y'all know the drill. Thank y'all guys so much for watching, and I will see you in the next video. Peace out.